Join me today for another book review, this time Merchant of Death. Welcome to the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bob, and today we're going to be talking about the book Merchant of Death, which I don't actually have my copy with me at the moment. I'll bring it to the podcast recording to show you I do actually own a physical copy, but there should be a picture over here if I've done everything right. Or maybe over here. Just depends on where I'm centered in the film here. So we'll go to the side and I'll try to put it up here. Anyway, the book is a book I picked up quite a while ago and read it a while ago, but the Strong Towns reviews seem to get some decent traction, so figured I'd try to talk about some of my non-fiction books that I do read, which I don't read anywhere near as much as I should. And part of the problem with doing the reviews of these is a number of them are political books, and I'm not going to review them on here because I just don't want to get mired in talking political baloney, and that's what will inevitably happen there. So just suffice to say, there are other books that I do read. Just won't be talking about them on here probably. So, like I said, today we're going to be talking about Merchant of Death, which is a book about a gentleman named Victor Bout. And be an interesting addendum at the very end of this, where I talk about some real world things that have since happened since the publication of the book, actually in the last 12 months, I believe, if my memory of events is correct. So, Victor Bout he's still alive, is a Russian national who was a world-renowned arms dealer, which is why the book is called Merchant of Death. And I believe I learned about this from The Daily Show back when, years and years ago. I believe Jon Stewart was still the host, and he would, actually have authors on there to talk about books, and, if they sounded interesting, I tended to pick them up. So this one, like I said, Victor Bout is an arms dealer. Parts of this story could end up sounding familiar. He is almost definitely the inspiration for Nicolas Cage's character in Lord of War. Not 100%, but a lot of it. So, at the end of the Cold War, which for those of you who are too young to know what the hell I'm talking about, the Cold War was it's called a Cold War, first of all, because there weren't direct engagements by the main parties, which were the US, NATO, and the Soviet Union, but primarily the United States and Russia. Everyone else mainly took a side seat to events. So, apologize, I'm sitting here with the windows down in an empty parking lot. Occasionally cars do roll through. So so US, Soviet Union, and it ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union, where all these satellite countries broke off and became free states again under their own rule, instead of under the various puppet governments that had been installed by the Russians. So all this happens in the early 90s. And we talked about this a little bit in the Star Trek videos too, because part of these events were the inspiration for Star Trek 6. So you had this happen, and all of a sudden there's just all kinds of Soviet military hardware just sitting around. No one knows what all's out there, because a lot of it's in countries that they don't have the records, because the Russians have the records. They don't know what all's in these buildings. They just know they're full of various arms and armaments. So along comes this guy named Victor Bout. Victor Bout also notices that there's a whole bunch of Russian airplanes for the taking. Now, for a brief crash course in Soviet design philosophy versus Western design philosophy, Soviets tended to build things that could take a beating and keep on going. because they wanted durability and reliability over precision. So, like the AK-47, for instance. That's a gun you can take it and bury it in your backyard for a year and a half and dig it up, and it should work just fine. You can probably not do that with its American counterpart. The American counterpart's a little finicky. So, they had the same philosophy for tanks and jets and everything else. So, whereas our Western aircraft tend to need like a real runway that's been paved and smooth and level and whatnot, these Soviet planes can land on a dirt strip that's been carved out of the jungle that's got potholes in it. All right. So he took these planes, literally just took them because there was no one to stop him, and then also got a bunch of pilots, former Russian Air Force, and probably former Russian military guys for the manpower, and they just struck out on their own. And what they started to do was they would find places where they could sell their wares, and then they would go to just warehouses in Eastern Europe that were just full of Soviet armaments and just start emptying them out. Load them up on the trucks, take them to the airfield, fly off with them. Take them, to Africa, the Middle East, Asia, wherever, and sell them. And being a businessman, the planes didn't come back empty. They would load them up with timber, with oil, with jewels, gold, whatever, furs, anything that they could sell back on the other side. And so he basically had his own Air Force for a while. And then people began to notice that all of a sudden these buildings were being emptied, and certain Western interests were starting to be like, hey, wait a minute, what was in here? Where's it all going? And who's doing this? And so he eventually wound up on people's radar. And for a while, he lived in Africa. He helped a Middle Eastern country. I want to say it's the United Arab Emirates. It's been also read the book, but I believe it's who it was. Helped them set up their whole international airport and everything, which meant that he got like an in with them and had an ability to use them to make forged importation orders, which is how they're able to move the weapons around through legitimate airports, because they had what appeared to be legitimate buy orders that were internationally recognized. And so the book goes into great detail as to the how part of this, as far as forging documents, who he had to ally himself with, how he helped certain other governments set things up to give himself an in. Then it also talks about like a brush with the Taliban, where one of his planes was forced to land whenever the Taliban launched their entire air force, the one jet they had, to bring them down. And then he negotiated a deal on the back end, or at least appeared to, and his guys escaped. So the book implies that he made a deal with the Taliban. And so, but I believe he swears that he didn't, and his guys really did escape. But as well as like, yeah, things were kind of convenient for that escape. Who knows the real story, but. And then during the Iraq War, there were, if I recall correctly from the book, there were 6 separate executive orders specifically saying our military could not do business with this gentleman. And what would happen is the Russian planes would show up. The commanders on the ground were thankful because they could land anywhere. And so it didn't matter if the airports kept getting bombed. They'd be able to land their planes, they could land them on a strip of highway if they had to. And they would, sorry, there's a random gentleman walking along, I believe on the phone, and or is crazy and is shouting. So I'm hoping he's on the phone and not just yelling at an imaginary friend. But since I have the windows down, I can hear him. I doubt it's picking up here on the speakers. But anyway, so what would happen is his planes would show up. Eventually, someone at Central Command would realize who it was, and it'd make its way back to at the time, the Bush administration. And then, in order to come down, quit doing business with those guys, they disappear for a while, and the same planes would show back up, miraculously with a new company name. Same guys unloading and loading planes, and the guys on the ground were like, well, they get stuff done. And then, the whole cycle would continue. So the U.S. kept doing business with this guy, even though he had executive orders not to. I believe he had an international arrest warrant for all kinds of crimes. And yeah, just, necessity said, hey, this guy's planes are getting the job done. So until the upper staff catches on, we're going to let it keep going. Now, eventually the gentleman was arrested. And he attempted to, prior to that, he attempted to sue whichever studio made the movie Lord of War, basically saying, hey, this is based on my life. And I don't remember if it's for defamation or if it was, hey, where's my money? I believe the suit was rejected, if I recall, but he did make the suit, and he has claimed, and it's, if you read the book, it's pretty obvious that the guy in the movie is based on him. So, and like I said, he was arrested. Now, I've not seen all of Lord of War, but I do believe the movie ends with Nicolas Cage sitting there and basically telling the people who have him prisoner that someone's going to come through that door, call or whatever. It's going to tell you to release me because I'm too important and you don't matter. Something to that effect. So, in an interesting turn of events, the gentleman was in jail for several years, but within the last year was traded in a prisoner swap to Russia, and he is now free, presumably rebuilding his network. So there you go. That's the addendum to the end. That's not mentioned in the book because the book ends shortly around his arrest, and like I said, it came out several years ago. So now if you do end up picking up this book and giving it a read and you don't follow current events, he was traded to the Russians in a prisoner swap and is now free again. The way he was greeted, I do believe he is actually a personal friend of Vladimir Putin, so I am sure he is back to shenanigans. So yeah, and some other current events that I'm not going to go into would probably tell you where he's going to start getting all of his arms this time. There were some that were abandoned, but not going to go into that because, like I said, I want to steer clear of politics and all this stuff. So anyway, that's the bulk of the book. So if you're ever curious how international arms smuggling on a massive scale is conducted, how people deal with, like, not immigration, although that's mentioned a few times too, things like customs and how to get into countries with massive amounts of arms and how to make things look legitimate and how all these things are done, this book goes into great detail on all this. And also just weird things about the guy's life, like whenever he lived in Africa and then set up shop in the Middle East. And everyone in the book's kind of like, well, obviously someone higher up in the Russian government is making sure that everything flows smoothly for him, and obviously it's Putin. So anyway, so that's pretty much that book. So if that sounds interesting to you, there'll be a link down in the description. It's an affiliate link. I explain those in another video, but essentially if you buy it from there, we get a portion of the sale. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and that's ultimately going to be going to help the channel if anyone does that. So, and we're appreciative. And even if you don't, if you want to read the book PDF someplace, that's cool too. It's a good book, so you should definitely check it out. Anyway, thank you folks for watching. Let me know down in the description if you want to hear more about books like this, less sci-fi, more non-fiction is what I should say. But if you want to hear more of those, let me know, and I will see what I can do. Trying to steer clear of politics. I've got a few others lined up that I'm going to do reviews for. After that, we'll see. But like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, because it's YouTube. But thank you folks for watching, and we'll see you later.